to the bunker.
Preppers, survivalists, off-gridders, homesteaders, and the like. Welcome to Top's Bunker, a podcast for preppers. Email shtf@topsbunker.com, website topsbunker.com. Don't forget to check the show notes in your podcast player for a link to help support the show, valuable products and gear, and extra info on this episode. I want to thank y'all for joining us. We got a great show for you. Here's the scenario. Cities are imploding, riots break out, looting, lockdowns, shortages, staying put, and bugging in is not an option. The streets around you will turn hostile, and your instinct will be to run, to get out, head for the woods, put distance and trees, lots of trees, between yourself and the chaos. But let me be clear, nature doesn't care why you're out there. The forest doesn't care about your bug out plan or your gear. Out there, the number one killer isn't anger, looters, or bullets. It's exposure. It'll be too hot, too cold, too wet, too dry. It will strip you down faster than any enemy ever could. Camping, bushcrafting, survival skills, the rules of three, these are your survival tools now. There's no thermostat, no four walls or ceilings, no reset button. Out there, it's you against the elements every hour of every day. The sun, it's gonna scorch you. The nights, you'll freeze. The wind will cut through your layers to test your limits. And rain, rain will soak you to your core, cover your skin and gear with damp, mold, and mildew, and drain your body of its strength with every step and every breath you take. If you're not ready, if you don't respect the monster that is exposure, it will kill you. And that's not hype, not clickbait. That's reality, hard-hitting and in your face, but real. It doesn't take long for hypothermia to set in when your clothing and skin are wet. Upwards of 2,500 people die from hypothermia each year in the US, with wet conditions and the homeless being the contributing factors. If you are bugging out to the woods, my friend, you are homeless. And there are other dangerous risks that are associated with trying to survive in wet conditions. Weakened immune systems, skin irritations and fungal infections, respiratory conditions, and rapid core temperature loss. Your body cools off 25 times faster when it's wet. And if that wasn't bad enough, you can actually overheat and have heat stroke if your body is wet while in a hot, humid environment. There's a reason why we practice the survival rules of three. 3 minutes without air, 3 hours without shelter, 3 days without water, 3 weeks without food. Maximizing and force multiplying your air, shelter, water, and food is key to your survival in extreme situations. 3 hours without shelter in extreme weather conditions is meaningful, it's important, and it should not be overlooked. Our bodies, and by extension our gear, needs shelter. Shelter from the heat, the cold, and yes, the damp and wet. Tonight we are going to live and learn vicariously through Jeremy's own real-world experience of surviving through an extreme wet condition environment for an uncomfortable extended period of time in the woods of North Carolina. Consider how you would do, what you would do, or do differently if you were in his boots. So let's get to it. Rhonda to keep the dogs quiet up there.
So what are we talking about?
Well, you went on an excursion, right? I mean, some sort of contract or whatever. Do you want to talk about that first and say what it is? And because that's going to lead right into what the show's about.
Yeah. And I've said it multiple times. I'm an independent contractor for a lot of DoD contracts that have to do with culminating exercises for special operations forces. Essentially, I'm a glorified paid actor. My military experience comes into it, but what I'm there for is to provide basically a training tool for soldiers who are going through certain training to interact with civilians that are part of a fictitious country, and we are guerrilla fighters to form a resistance against a tyrannical government.
Most of our listeners would know this as like war games.
Yeah, there's a couple of different, anybody who's been part of the military community have probably heard of some of these contracts. Robin Sage, Grey Knight, Derna Bridge, and a couple of others. Because of the the expansiveness of them. They're huge contracts. So they actually expand over multiple counties. So right around like the Fayetteville, Fort Bragg area and west, almost all the way down to the border where South Carolina and North Carolina is. And then the furthest west lane, which is where I'm at, is actually it's actually kind of close to Charlotte. That's how expansive this thing is. For this particular, this last contract, this last class, this has got to be the weirdest August that I had ever been through here in North Carolina. I say that because during the entirety of the contract, which is right around 2 weeks, it rained 24/7, except for like a day, maybe a day and a half total. It was constant rain, like torrential downpour the whole time. I actually woke up some mornings in August and it was around 55 degrees. And I walked out and I'm like, the world's ending. Like, why is it 55 degrees in August? What the hell is going on here?
So how long have you been doing these contracts?
Around 2020.
4 or 5 years you've been doing this every year?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Robin Sage has, they'll be going up in classes, but they'll be going up to 5 classes. This last one has actually given me time to consider possibly taking a mental and physical pause from this particular contract.
Ooh, a hiatus.
Yeah. I consider myself to be a pretty tough dude. I can still hang with these young guys mostly, even though I'm a short, fat man with a gray beard. But the weather, it absolutely broke me off. Like, I don't know how people live in the Northwest area of the country where it rains. Like I've heard it rains there for months on end. I don't know what that's like, but I can imagine just how angry I would be at everything. I'll just put it to you this way. So our camp is set back in the woods, about 100 yards off of a trail, and we're sort of set back in the woods. Lots of cover, lots of shade. But for anybody who's actually considered like bugging out, there's this glorified sort of romanced thing about, I'm going to grab my stuff and I'm going to go live in the woods when the S, hits the fan and I'm out and I'm going to, have this community and we're going to live in the woods like cavemen and, down with
like Robin Hood and his merry men.
Yeah. Men in tights.
Men in tights. Great. That's a great movie, man.
It really was. It was so dark, and without enough sunshine down in the area that we were, I did not have all the clothes that I had worn. And I always pack heavy for these contracts. I always bring extra clothing because I know that there are certain days where I am going to get wet as it's part of the mission. But like even the one long sleeve shirt that I had with me just in case it was cool in the mornings was completely drenched. And I wasn't even able to take all of my clothing up to a pasture to lay out in the sun because we're in a tactical environment, quote unquote. So the one day that we had of sunshine, everything, I hung it up, I tried, but nothing dried out. I mean, we had a lot of our students and contractors who were limited on the amount of boots and shoes and stuff that they have with them. And we started getting cases of pretty severe trench foot. And one of them, the most severe, was a medic. And I was shocked because I'm looking at him and I'm like, dude, what's wrong with you? Why are you limping? He was trying to whisper in my ear that he needed me to get a hold of the cadre. And I was not going to allow him to come out of roll. And I said, okay, what is wrong with you? Show me what is wrong with you. You're a medic. Let me see it. And he pulled off his shoes and his socks, and I was absolutely floored. He had severe bilateral trench foot to the point where the bottom of his feet, it's going to sound absolutely disgusting when I say this, but the bottom of his feet looked like a bowl of grits. Like the skin was already raised. It was blanched white. It was puffed up. It was blistering. And in your foot, you have sort of these crevices, that they follow the pad of your foot and your calluses, and you can feel them, when you run your fingernail or your finger through them. Those crevices had started to widen. and he had classic trench foot. It was nasty looking. And I'm looking at him and I'm like, please tell me that you have been changing your socks, because I'm starting to question whether or not you have. And he said, yes, I've been changing my socks. I have even changed my boots. Now all of my socks and all of my boots are completely drenched. Nobody had a way to actually dry anything out. So what we started doing is we would stoke up the fire by our kitchen area, and him and a couple of other people that I knew had, bad feet going on. We had them bring all their socks and all their shoes, and we put them around the fire, and we just had them sit there, and we hung up a line and we started drying out their stuff, and we, got their feet close enough to the fire to where at least the warmth of the fire could get to their feet to start drying out the skin. But that also medically that creates its own challenges, because once you have moist skin that's raised and you introduce warmth to them, if they dry too quickly, then that skin starts to, like, for lack of a better term, it starts to roll in on itself. It can make things worse if you don't bring them up in temperature evenly.
Is there a cure for that?
The best cure is to get them dry.
Is that kind of like what happens to your hands when you're in the pools too long?
Yeah. Okay. You start to see like that wrinkle. Mm-hmm. Your fingers wrinkle up when you're in the bathtub too long, and kids think it's cool looking.
It's not cool on your feet.
No. And the thing is that the human body can only absorb so much external moisture. And what ends up happening is the top of the dermis starts to loosen up, and it starts to, I won't say decay, but it starts to slough. It starts to become loose enough to where that skin can actually just separate itself. His had not gotten to that particular point yet, but they were white. Any much longer, and he would have had whole sections of the pad of his foot come completely off. So we kept him in the fight.
So that's a hospital visit.
Yeah, if it had gotten any worse, we probably would have had to contact someone. But I took pictures of his feet, and I think I sent it to y'all. But I sent him to the guy that we call our G chief. He's a retired SF guy. He's part of the role play, but I was like, I'm gonna put it on you to whether or not you want to contact him. And he said, no, I'm not going to contact him until he says that he needs us, absolutely needs us to contact them. We're not.
So this was a trainee, not a trainer.
Yeah, it was a trainee. It was a student.
Got it.
And right when I saw him start to whisper into my ear, I just put my hand up, and I was not going to allow him to come out of role, because he's a great medic. He's a great medic, and he was really doing a good job. The problem is that when some people are really, really dedicated to that role, especially a medic, they can oftentimes ignore the things that are wrong with them because they have such a drive to take care of others. And this is one of those guys. But his medical knowledge was absolutely outstanding. He and I had a lot of talks, and again, going back to the bug out theory of this, depending on where you live and, the time of year, a lot of people, they associate summer with just heat. And if you were to live, like, say, in the central states, depending on, like South Texas, all the way up to, say, basically where you guys are, that there's going to be heat. But the summertime also brings the rains, especially where I live here in North Carolina on the East Coast. Summertime always is famous for a lot of rain. We just don't normally have 2 frickin' weeks of nonstop, unrelenting rain.
And that can happen in a real life scenario.
Yeah.
So as part of your role-playing project, does the weather factor in as one of the issues? Is it part of the mission?
It's going to happen regardless of the weather. Cold, rain, sun, beautiful, not beautiful, hail. The only time that they will ever stop or pause or delay training is if there is some factor that could be life-threatening. Because when we're operating in austere environments in the military and we're engaging the enemy, the weather doesn't care. The weather's not going to give a damn. In the same scenario,
that's right.
If you have been forced to bug out, or if you have voluntarily, for some unknown reason, decided that this is the best course of action for you and your family, you have to deal with the consequence of the weather if you do not have a plan and you do not have a place to go. And again, this ideology or this romanced theory of jumping into the woods and I'm going to live this thing out. No, you're not. No, you're not. Can you? Yes. Should you? Hell no. It's not sensical to do that to yourself, because your best shelter is where you already are. If it was an absolute emergency and you had to leave, yeah, okay, I get it. I got it. But I'll just put it to you this way. 2 weeks in the rain, living in a tent, and I had plenty of stuff and I have all my gear, and I was packed to the point of like someone who had pre-made totes and all their stuff, threw it in a truck and then, bugged out to the woods. That's how heavy I was packed. So I had enough stuff to sustain myself for a considerable amount of time. The only problem is that if you're living in the dark and you're living in the wet and you're living in an environment that doesn't really provide any airflow because of the weather, guess what happens? Mold. Mold was growing on the inside of my tent. Not a little bit. All of my gear looked like a damn forest. It had actual mold spores growing like a lot off of my stuff.
I saw the pictures, man. It looked like nasty food that had been left in the refrigerator.
Yeah.
It was like hairy and stuff growing off of stuff. It was horrible looking. I thought it was some sort of a contagion or something came and hit you.
That's what I felt like, because I walked into my tent and I can't remember what we were getting ready to do. And I walked in there and I knew that the bottom of my tent, I have to get rid of this tent now. So the bottom of my tent had become saturated and I started to have standing water inside of my tent, and I couldn't figure out the why until I realized that some of the seals around the edge of the bottom of my tent were so wet that they just loosened up. And because those seals had loosened up, water was coming in. So I was trying to solve that problem.
Because I would have assumed you would have had a waterproof tent.
Well, it used to be, because anything water, nothing that is advertised as waterproof or water resistant is 100% waterproof or water resistant unless it is an enclosed container.
Yeah.
And I say that because my tent, I've had it for quite some time. I add extra waterproofing to my tent. I reinforce my seals. But after 2 weeks of rain, eventually something's going to loosen up. And the corners of those seals loosened up and water was starting to stand. And it was all, I figured, okay, it's concentrated in this one corner. I can see it. It's not awful. It is annoying. I've grabbed some MRE box, the cardboard. I laid that down so it could absorb the water, and that started to work. And then I walked in one day, and I'm for some reason the smell hit me, like this funky, that basement smell.
Right, mildew.
Yeah, I turned on my light because I couldn't see, and I looked at the sides of the tent, and I was like, okay, those look like that looks like mildew or mold spores. And then I started looking around, and my hats, all of my hats had mold spores growing on them, like out. Like, were
they sitting in the water or were they hung up? Or
no?
Wow,
they were hung up. They were wet, and I had hung them to possibly try to get some dryness to them. And they literally looked like fuzzy creatures. That's how much mold had grown on them in such a short amount of time. All of them, all 4 of my hats.
Well, in the construction industry, we have a saying, water always finds a way, and it does. And that's the number one damaging thing in the construction. When you're building a project, that's the number one thing. Anytime someone says the word leak, it is all hands on deck immediately, because water will destroy everything.
Yeah. And I found the mold in my hats, and then I started picking up my gear, and I was like, I started cursing so bad on the side of my tent. All of my tactical kit had mold growing off of it. My rucksack had mold. It was covered in mold. But I had all of my clothes and my stuff inside that ruck, was inside of a waterproof bag. I use a contractor bag, the 6 mil or the thick, thick ones.
Mm-hmm.
And then I also have a roll up dry bag inside of that.
Mm-hmm. That's the kind that can be like submerged underwater, right?
Yeah. So that stuff was dry. And I had like my tough box was inside of there. The stuff that was inside of my tough box, it was, generally dry. There was actually some dampness that had gotten in there.
Where were you storing your food?
Inside of my tough box.
Mm.
Yeah. So the cooks, they do their thing. And we are allowed to bring food. We're just not allowed to eat our own personal food or drink in front of the students.
Oh, you were able to eat the food from the camp. Like there was food there for you guys.
Yeah. So the Montagnards, and I've talked about them before. They're from Vietnam.
Mm-hmm.
We have two guys. They're primarily our cooks, and those dudes, they throw down, man.
I looked that up back when we did that episode. Those are real dudes. That's a real thing.
That's a very real thing.
I've never heard of that phrase until you said it, and I had to look it up. And I went down the rabbit hole and research on it. It's a historical group of people that are that good at what they do.
Mm-hmm. So these guys, they cook, and the first like day or two, the part of the role is that we don't have much food inside of our camp because we're just a bunch of refugees. But then we start getting the networks set up and all this different stuff, and then we start getting produce. And one of our drivers, he raises meat chickens. He texted me before he did it. He's like, "Hey, dude, I'm gonna probably be bringing in some chickens." I'm like, "Bet. We could definitely handle that." I didn't realize that he was just trying to get rid of chickens. This dude brought a total of 34 chickens into the damn camp.
Oh my God.
Well, he dropped them off, and we have to actually.
Alive or dead?
Oh no, they're live. He dropped them off. Yeah. He dropped him off in batches of like 10 or 12 inside these like small kennels.
Oh my God.
And it's great, but we have to hike out and then go get them and then hike them back into our camp. And 4 of them were freaking roosters.
Mm.
So day 3, or it was probably like day 3 or day 4, the Montagnards, they come up to me and they're like, "Hey, we're going to go ahead and cook chicken." And I was like, "Kill every single one of those roosters right now. Cause I want them dead. I hate those stupid things." These roosters, and they were really pretty birds, but man, they were mean. And all of the meat chickens that he brought in, they're not pretty chickens. They're not. They are bone ugly chickens, and they were all female. So these males, these roosters were just, man, they were not nice to those girls.
Oh, and, no, they never are.
So one whole meal was just straight up roosters. Like straight up roosters. And I even convinced the Montagnards to, I won't say it was a trick, but I got them to make rooster fries, and a couple of students ate them.
What's rooster fries?
You've never heard of rooster fries?
I've never. You got to do tell.
Rooster fries are the fried.
Don't tell me it's the.
Yes, that's exactly. That's exactly.
My God.
No, not their giblet hangs. They're nuts. They deep fry their nuts. Yes,
no way.
I'm telling you, they bread and fry their nuts. And these guys were like, "Well, when in Rome," and I'm like, "Go ahead, bro. You go right on ahead."
The shit has had to seriously hit the fan. You need to eat some chicken nuts.
Yeah, it's but it's not. Some people do it with more than just, because we're going back to like peasant food, the scraps that were left over. They made use of, everything. Some people will also use the giblets, which is your liver, the gizzards, the heart, all of those things. And all they do is they cut them up and they they bread them and deep fry them. That was peasant food back then. The Montagnards are experts in that. We had a bunch of cadets this class too, because it's summertime, and a lot of the colleges and the military academy, they let out and they send their cadets out to do different stuff to get kind of, real world experience. We had 14 or 15 actual cadets from different colleges, and they're enthralled by all of this stuff. They've never seen, these are 19, 20-year-old kids. So they're watching these Montagnards grab a rooster by its feet, the chicken's just flapping everywhere, and he just swings it and smashes its head into a tree, and then gives it one more good whack and then gives it a spin, and there goes the head. And they were like, oh my God, he just killed that chicken like that. I'm like, hell yeah. And you're going to eat it too, aren't you?
That's because their chicken comes from McDonald's and the grocery store.
Yeah. So, again, back on track, but so this glorified, glamorous, idea of bugging out. I would just tell people this: if it had to come down to it, hopefully you do have a place to go. But if you do not take the long-term effects of the weather on you and your stuff into consideration, you are going to be absolutely miserable, and your health is going to start to suffer. So, and I know that because back in Afghanistan 2012, I did have severe bilateral trench foot. I almost lost a couple of toes. And being in the water, and I had the opportunity to change my shoes, and I even brought my muck boots with me. They're waterproof from the outside. But once your pants have become completely saturated and they start going into the boot, your boots are now wet on the inside. So I'm walking around, and I knew there was some water in there. I knew it was a little bit. I just didn't realize that it wasn't a little bit. It was a lot of bit. So I'm slopping around, and then the back of my heel started to hurt. And I'm like, you know what? I know what that feels like. And I'd go slide this stupid boot off, and the back portion of my heel came off. And it wasn't terribly bloody or, nasty or anything like that. But I had to try to figure out a way to try out the inside of my rubber boots, which I never did. I never got to wear them again because they were completely moist on the inside, and I didn't have a way to dry them without sacrificing some clothing. It's a constant struggle. And in the infantry, because I was raised infantry, that is a daily, if not several times a day kind of thing. You'd slide your socks off, let your feet air dry, put some powder on them, and then sometimes you actually had to turn your socks inside out, put them on the other side, and because you only have so much room to put your socks, because you have other stuff that you have to have, and you have to figure out what's worth sacrificing for as far as room. Me personally, I would give up space for more t-shirts to have more socks.
Right. And if you're in a bug out kind of a situation where you're thinking, oh, well, we'll just build a fire and we'll hang up our socks up. Well, okay. You got 12 people in your group, and every one of their shirts and pants and socks and underwear are all wet. Where are you hanging this stuff? How big's the fire going to be?
Yeah. And how many fires are you willing to have? And are you willing to have a bunch of fires that could potentially bring in unwanted people?
That's right. So
these are all of the things that, again, there's 1,000 YouTube videos, and check out my bug out gear and check out this bug out location and blah, blah, blah. At this point in my life, if you said, hey, we're thinking about bugging out, I'd be like, go right on ahead, homie. If it gets to the point where I think that it's dire straits, there could be loss of life, or it is that extreme, perhaps. But just to bug out on a whim? No, the majority of my preps and my gear and my stuff and my fortress is here for right now. And if that changes, it changes. But if not, this is it. I know where to go. I do have a location to go to.
And also you're smart enough to know that you could find another fortress as well.
Yeah.
The last place you want to be really is out in the wild.
Oh, no. Yeah, no.
That's the last place. People say, well, I'll just go under a bridge, we'll get some boxes. And no, you're not, because it's going to be really nasty.
Yeah.
And not only that, but you could have gotten sick in your tent from breathing all those spores that are coming out of that stuff. It's not the mold that hurts you. It's the spores that come out into the air that hurt you.
Yeah. And I did develop a cough.
Oh, I imagine. Yeah.
So the weather, again, raining for 2 weeks straight. And there's another factor about that people probably don't think about, and that's the danger of weather. The area that we were in it was a gentle slope, but it was sloped, and it was sloping down, which creates mud,
slippage and tripping hazards, stuff like that.
Yeah. So it created a lot of mud, and it created a lot of a lot of loose ground, and on a gently sloped hill here in, North Carolina, we're mostly pines, and the root ball on a pine isn't as sturdy as a lot of people would think. They see this massive pine tree that's, 8 feet around and 65 feet tall, and it's 400 years old, but the root ball only goes about 3.5 to 4 feet in the ground. There was trees falling down all around us every single day, and not just like branches, whole trees were uprooting and coming down.
Wow.
We constantly had to keep an eye on that. Another thing, nobody really thinks about this is that as it continues to rain and the water is hitting the ground and it's moving leaves and dirt, all of those things, as soon as that rain lets up, guess what it exposed? All of the critters that were in the ground that have now had the opportunity to come out. We had people getting stung by yellow jackets almost every single day. Thank goodness nobody was, allergic. I got stung. I got stung right in the crook of the arm on the very first day, and it got me right in the vein, and it still hurts now. It got me just in the absolute worst spot, just right in the vein. These are just those little nuanced things that people don't think that is going to happen to them. So there's the hazards of the weather besides just the mud and the muck and the slips and all those different things. The very last night we were there, the next morning we were going to culminate and then end the exercise and pack out. About 3:00 in the morning, for some reason, something woke me up. It was a weird sensation. It was a weird feeling. It was something. It was like 3:30 in the morning. I remember opening up my eyes and I could hear noise, and I had been dreaming about rain, and a lightning bolt hit right in the center of our camp, not but 15 or 20 feet from me. It actually hit in our kitchen area. And one of the students, for some unknown reason, was up at that time. He was probably the one on watch. He just started screaming, "Everybody up, everybody up, everybody up." And I thought at first that it was the cadre who had gotten angry, or they were going to blow out, the students for some sort of punishment reason. But everybody was freaking out. And I could hear some of the female cadets in the back. They were screaming and, I'm like, oh my gosh, dude. So I throw on some shoes, throw on a t-shirt, and I start running from tent to tent, checking on people, individually checking on them. And of course, none of those young kids had ever been, near or affected by a lightning strike. I have. So I'm going around and I had to check each and every single person. And they were like, "Oh my gosh, I felt it in my hands. I felt it in my hair." I'm like, well, yeah, it's about 1,000 volts of electricity that just came in here through the ground. But it's not just, there's the danger of getting hit by lightning, but there's also the danger of the lightning hitting the ground and being conducted through the already saturated
and getting electrocuted.
That was a real danger. And there were a couple of people that didn't get electrocuted, but they did definitely get a fuzzy feeling. And in talking with this student, I asked him, I was like, what did you experience? And he said, right before it happened, the hair on my arms and the hair on my head felt like it was standing up. And I was like, yep, that's classic. I was like, the lightning was looking for you individually because you had become negatively grounded against a positively charged ionosphere.
Yeah, most people don't realize that lightning actually comes from the ground. Now we see the bolt come from the sky, but the electrical charge itself is coming from the grounded part of the ground, which is why they call it ground.
Yep.
And the lightning up in the air has these sort of feelers that you don't see, and when it finds, well, in that case, with your hair sticking up, then the bolt decides to come down because the path of least resistance is the path that lightning takes. Yeah. If you feel that when you're out in a storm, get on the ground as fast as you can.
Yeah. Yeah. The first time it happened to me, it was during a field training exercise many, many years ago. And I had this platoon sergeant who found out that when I very first entered the Army, I used to be in communications. So we used to have these really, really old They're basically phones, and they're connected by glorified speaker wire. And he was like, hey, help me out, get all this, whole area rigged up, with all this different wire. And I said, yeah, Roger. So I went out and I actually connected each one of the fighting positions with these different phones. And the weather started to turn, and I was testing the system when in the distance, not even really super close to us, but in the distance, lightning struck the ground, traveled through the ground, went into that wire into my ear. And it burned me.
Like from a headset or something?
Well, it's like a hand mic.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah, but all of these different. So essentially, what had happened is by connecting all of these different phones, which have a C or a D battery inside of them, and a couple of them have a hand crank. By connecting all of these phones with wire, even though it was buried, I basically created a target for the lightning, because all of those charged lines were now connected into a big circular pattern. But it burned my ear, and it was just because it just went through the ground and into the wire, the speaker wire basically, and through the headset into my ear. So I know what it's like. But people can get killed instantaneously by getting hit by lightning, and that's probably something that a lot of people don't think that would ever happen to them.
No.
But it's actually, it's a lot more prevalent than a lot of people think. I forget the statistics, but there is always a possibility, depending on where you live and the conditions, that you could be struck by lightning. And my own philosophy is if you do get struck by lightning, that was meant to happen for some reason. But again, all of these things go back to this conversation of bug in, bug out. This is going to be sweet. I'm going to go and live by my own wits and 43 MREs. No, you're not.
When I first started prepping, I thought that it would be awesome to be able to take all my stuff and go out into the woods, and I would be it'd be Rambo. It would be just awesomeness. And it's so, and it's funny because as you get older, the older you get, the more that whole scene does not interest you. When you're like an 18, 19, 20-year-old, you think, oh, it's fun. I'm out there, I'm wet with my friends, and everything's fine. When you're 40, 50, 60, or 70, that's bad. You don't want to be wet all day. It's not good at all. No. And we and as preppers, we always talk about winter. We harp on winter and snowstorms and cold and how it can kill you, and we harp on heat in the summertime. But we rarely ever talk about wet, and it's probably the one biggest danger out of all of them.
Yeah, and I would say that the older that you get, and as your skin starts to lose its elasticity, and your skin starts to become a little bit more loose, the danger of stuff like trench foot and being soaked all of the time, it starts to pose a lot more risk as you get older. Your body can no longer absorb, that much external liquid, basically. And the danger of your skin just starting to slough off is a lot higher the older you get. When I started this journey basically as a kid, Red Dawn, of course, the original Red Dawn.
Exactly. That was to me. I was like, why? What are they complaining about? I would love to do what they're doing.
Yeah. Everybody, at least in our era, was like, yeah, I could absolutely do that. You absolutely can. And you will most likely absolutely not last very long.
You'll hate it.
You'll hate it.
Movies and shows like that, they make it very glamorous.
Yeah, they do. Yeah. And, I know of people who have chosen to live the hermit lifestyle, and they have lived off grid for the majority of their life, and they've been documented, and, they've chosen to live that way. But they also they're living in areas that have seasons and are fairly much predictable. There's a lot of people that actually live that life in the Ozarks, in the Appalachia. But you try to live that life, say like in South Texas, no, man, you're not going to do it. No, you're going to fry. you're going to fry, or you're going to get swept away in a crazy flash flood, because we have those down there too.
Mm-hmm.
Again, the lessons learned from this is, if you think that you have to bug out, don't imagine to yourself that a bug out, unless you're going to a predetermined location that is already supplied.
Set up.
Yeah. Don't think that you're going to be able to have enough supplies to just go out there and just hermit it out for the rest of your life, because you're not. And it's the simplest, stupid things, running out of powder just to be able to powder up your giblies or your feet. Imagine running out of that and how much chafing you're going to go through, because one, your last pair of underwear is completely soaked. You're walking around, free balling with your wet pair of pants on. And if you've never had chapped inner thighs, I'm sorry, but it's extremely uncomfortable. If you have never had prickly heat to start to develop on your back because you can never get your back dry, it sucks. It sucks. And people think, well, you're not going to get prickly heat in the rain. I'm sorry, but yes, you can. You absolutely can, especially if you're hiking a lot with a pack on your back. If you're hiking a lot and you're constantly wet and you're constantly dirty, I guarantee you're going to develop prickly heat on your back, down your butt, on your legs. And if you're wearing an old military style ruck like I have, if don't have it padded, you're going to have the shape of a cross on your back, because that's exactly where that prickly heat's going to develop. Yeah. And the last point I'll bring up on it as far as the weather is, a lot of people think, well, I'm out here in the rain and I don't feel thirsty and, I'm fine. No, you're not. You still have to force yourself, even if you have to force yourself to drink water and take in electrolytes, because your body's tricking itself to thinking, well, I'm out here, it's kind of cool, it's wet all the time, I'm not dehydrated. You absolutely are. You have to force yourself to drink water on a regular basis and take in electrolytes, because even in the cold or the cool or the wet, you can still go down as a heat casualty, just the same as if it was 100 degrees outside.
Exposure.
Yeah, you have to have water. You have to. And exposure is going to kill you faster than dehydration is going to kill you. That's why they tell you in the rules of 3, you've got 3 hours for shelter generally, depending on the weather. If it's extreme, you got about 3 hours. When I set up my tent and put all my gear, it was that day that we, actually got everything set up. It was dry. That night, the rain started, and it didn't let up at all, except for that one particular day. And I didn't even really get the chance to get anything dried out. I was able to take the rain fly off the top of my tent to get some airflow. Opened up the windows, try to get some airflow through there. What I ended up having to do is, on one of the times that I had to go outside of the camp, I stopped by a Dollar General. I grabbed a couple of bottles of rubbing alcohol and a spray bottle, and I went absolutely berserk on all of my gear, all of my clothes that I had already been wearing. I started spraying everything with rubbing alcohol to kill all the mold. And it's even some of the stuff that I have is still stained. I mean, I've washed it thoroughly, dried it, it's been sprayed. It's stained from the actual mold spores. So
you lived it, man.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, we're trying to tell everybody out there the thing, and, the truth about these things. You just lived it. You just went through it.
Yeah.
I didn't. I have a house. So when I get soaking wet, I'm outside all day. When I get soaking wet outside, I go in the house and I change clothes.
Mm-hmm. And, you think about it too, like the way the human body is designed in the heat, right? We sweat, and then, hopefully a breeze comes along, and that, the breeze hits your sweat and it's supposed to cool the body off. That's how we naturally, do stuff. And anybody who's worked outside a lot during the heat, and they get saturated with sweat and then it dries off, and you get that white crust, that's the salt that you've expelled outside of your body. And that's one of the points of that is that's where we start talking about electrolytes. Like, people underestimate how much salt you actually need. Just get one of those pairs of clothes that you were wearing in the heat and it's saturated, and Now you have to replace all that, but you can actually see it when it's hot. Now take that and still sweat that much, lose that much electrolytes, but you can't tell because you're constantly soaked in water, because it's raining all of the time. That goes back to that emphasis of drinking water, taking in electrolytes, salting your food, and doing all of the things that you would normally do. But because you're constantly wet, you have to force yourself sometimes to actually do it.
Final thoughts.
Get good gear and try to waterproof your gear as much as you can. And just realize that even the best gear and the best waterproofing eventually is going to break down. So you have to find ways, redundant ways, to protect what you have in the event that you actually do have to bug out.
My prepper brothers and sisters, we've often talked about chaos and the instinct to run from it. At some point, bugging out will make sense, and the forest will be our first choice. We've considered it, planned for it, and practiced it, whether in person or in our imaginations. And tonight, we were faced with one of the realities of that bug out location. Woods and forest and remote rural locations can hold a wealth of materials that we can gather, collect, and harvest to help us survive for an extended period of time, away from the chaos erupting in the cities. But the wilderness is not the haven we've all made it out to be. We must consider it a beautiful battlefield. Exposure is your enemy in that battlefield, and it never sleeps. The heat will burn you, the cold will shock you, rain will soak you, turn your gear damp, invite mold and mildew, and strip the fight from your bones. If you underestimate it, even for a moment, you're done. That's why we train. That's why we prepare. Shelter, fire, water, clothing, respect for the elements and what they can do to us, respect for our bodies and gear and the limits of both. Survival out there isn't luck. It's skill and knowledge and planning and practice. Rifles and gadgets are a must when the cities fall. But if you can't endure the elements, exposure wins, and you will not survive. Stay prepped, stay happy. Thanks for listening, and good night.
Rivers winding round words in my head. Shivering pines say that summer is dead. Chest feels hollow and my hands are numb. Do my best to swallow all the things I've done. You break your back, but you still don't have bread. You won't go back on the things that you said. You bleed your heart out, and it takes every drop. You've come too far now to never stop. Wash me in the water and I'll never go back, even when I'm walking to the man pass. Trust a man, cause he'll just let you down. Crooked and twisted, we grow from the ground. From dust we came in, dust we shall return.